Okay, so the next category of teaching methods that we'll look at is called inquiry-based learning, and the two specific methods that we'll investigate are case study and problem solving. So what is inquiry-based learning? Well, there's a couple of different names for it. Sometimes it's called case-based learning, inquiry-based learning, discovery-based learning. Basically, at the premise of all of these different approaches is that we are challenging students by presenting them with a question or a hypothesis or some data that they have to kind of figure out what it means. Sometimes students are also generating that themselves, but oftentimes the faculty member is the one who's providing them with the kind of prompt or question or situation. Most of the time they involve real world problems so that they have immediate relevancy to the work that is related to that discipline. So let's first take a look at the case study. I think these are pretty obvious kinds of situations. I think most of you are probably familiar with case studies. You've probably used them before at some point as a student. And basically it's presenting some type of scenario and asking you to discuss amongst your colleagues or classmates, what should we do in this situation? So it's kind of laying out a case or a scenario, and then as a group you decide what the best course of action would be. Oftentimes you might be relying on what you've learned in the class so far, or using some additional resources to help guide your response to that case study analysis. So what are some good cases? Well, in order for cases to be, pretty effective and achieve your goal, you want to make sure that they're real or relevant. So students want to think that this is a possible real situation that they could encounter, because then they're obviously going to be more invested in the process. We also want to make sure that our case analysis requires that students have to engage in decision making and use that prior knowledge that they've already gained to apply it to the situation. So when you go back and you think about Bloom's taxonomy, we're really kind of getting at least midway up the pyramid with applying and analyzing and evaluating. We're really kind of climbing that cognitive ladder, so to speak. It's also important that cases don't have a right answer. Like, it shouldn't be that this is the only way, that they're trying to figure out the correct answer. Cases often have many right answers, and mostly we're looking at the problem-solving approach and making sure that students in these situations have good reasons and rationales for why they're doing, their recommended approach. And then, of course, we want to make sure that there's some kind of risk or importance attached to it. So not only is it meaningful in the sense that it might be real, but why does it matter so much? So obviously the health science areas are really good at this. They can have some really amazing case scenarios that could be real life or death situations. In other areas it may not be that extreme in terms of importance, but maybe it can have a significant impact on the financial aspect of a business and whether or not that business will continue, say, in that arena. So the idea here is we want to make sure the cases have all of these different characteristics, and these are talked about more at length by Nelson. So here's just one example of what a case study might look like. I used one that's related to our course content. So you're teaching a new course and you've assigned students into groups, but now you have several group members coming to you after class and they're expressing their concern about a group member who's not contributing. So what are you going to do? And again, you could have students work together in a group to figure out what it is that they should do. You would have to have some background knowledge on what constitutes effective groups, conflict resolution, the reason and rationale for the group project, what the purpose of the assignment is. All those different variables would obviously come into play as students have to determine how they would respond in this situation. Now, problem-based learning is another inquiry-based model, and it really is very, very similar to the case study, except for that it's more in-depth in nature. So instead of just being focused on what you've already learned in class and maybe through assigned readings, it asks students to go much beyond that and dive a lot deeper into the discipline and to that content area that's related to the problem. So here's how problem-based learning works. Again, you would present a problem where students could identify a problem that might be related to the discipline or the course content and, of course, your learning outcomes. And then they would have to figure out, okay, so in order to solve this problem, what kind of information do I need to know? Okay, so what information do I already know that will help me answer, solve this problem and come up with solutions? What additional information am I going to have to seek out because I don't yet know this content? then so after you gather all that information, you start to share that among your group members and you start to brainstorm possible solutions. So the information gathering in this problem-based approach versus the case study is just a much more in-depth experience. Probably cannot happen just during class. You would probably have to use some external time, out of class time to really get students engaged in this process. And then at the end of the day, what you're probably asking students to do is to create some kind of product. It may be a written report, might be a verbal report, that they're outlining their solution and also the rationale for their solution. So that's really what we're looking for with problem-based learning. So that gives you an overview of the case-based and problem-based approaches that are kind of housed under that inquiry-based model. Okay, alrighty, take care.